as Gemma just said, my name's Rowan. I work for the Marine Stewardship Council, MSC, in the commercial team, so predominantly in business outreach and engagement. I'm just going to talk for about 15 minutes about what the MSC is, what we do, and how it could be relevant to your business potentially. So I want to start just by going through the basics of what the MSC is, how it works, and what the blue MSC eco label that you can see here in the middle, what that means. So I'll start with the obvious thing that we all know. Overfishing is a massive and growing problem. So this data you can see on the screen here, it's from UNFAO, monitors over 500 fish stocks across the globe with widely varying abundances, catch sizes, etc. Right now, as you can see, almost 35% of these stocks are overfished, and that compares to 10% in 1974. So it's been a massive growing problem caused by overfishing, illegal fishing, climate change more recently, and this has a massive impact on species, ecosystems, and also on communities that rely on fishing. So that is why MSC exists. But what do we actually do? So essentially, we function as a standard-setting organization. So fisheries and supply chain companies and consumer-facing outlets that meet our standards can use our eco label to promote their sustainable fish. So you can see our theory of change here on the screen, which essentially describes how we work with our partners, with fisheries, suppliers, and retailers to encourage a more sustainable seafood market. And this theory of change is built on the premise that using our label provides market-based advantages. So as more MSC label products become available, there's more consumer awareness and there's more retailer demand, it just drives more interest in sustainability, and we get a virtuous loop. Let's go back. So our approach means that everyone can essentially play their part in safeguarding the future of our oceans and seafood supplies while enjoying seafood rather than giving it up. So it's built upon this virtuous cycle driven by the market advantages that the label brings, or so the theory goes. And this is what an MSC supply chain would look like. So you can see it starts with the fishery, as I said. Fisheries have to meet our certification standards for sustainability and ecosystem impacts. And then we have to go through chain of custody certification as well. So a key part of the MSC program is that we provide assurance from ocean to plate, which influences the choices that people make when buying seafood to transform the sustainable seafood market to a more eco-friendly basis. They then have to go through eco-label licensing to assure that the label is being used correctly, and that's how these final products with our blue eco-label on are produced. But I think to understand MSC properly, I need to just go through what the standards actually mean in more concrete terms. So as I said, it starts with the MSC fisheries standard. This is our standard for what a sustainable fishery looks like. Essentially, it's used to assess if a fishery is well managed and sustainable. And once a fishery is successfully certified to this fishery standard, it can sell its certified catch with our blue MSC eco label. And this is built around three fundamental principles. So the first one, fairly intuitive, it's the sustainability of the stock. We want our fisheries to only be taking a certain amount from their fisheries so that the stock population can replenish and the fishing can continue for generations to come. However, the MSC wants their standard to be about more than just basic sustainability. We also want our fisheries to be minimizing ecosystem impacts. And specifically, we want them to be reducing their bycatch of often vulnerable and endangered species such as sharks, birds, dolphins, and turtles. And finally, we want our fisheries to be effectively managed. That means compliant with the law, everyone employed is aware of the sustainability requirements, just well-run fisheries. And then once a certificate is issued, it lasts for 5 years. There are annual surveillance audits to check that best practice is being maintained, and many fisheries are required to make improvements if they're not doing well enough. This is a rigorous standard. The MSC is the only global wild capture fisheries certification program that simultaneously meets the best practice requirements set up by UNFAO and the Global Sustainable Seafood Initiative, as well as ICEAL. And just to put some numbers on top of the impact of the fisheries standard. So 19% of all wild marine catch was engaged with the MSC as of our most recent data. That amounts to 516 fisheries globally, all around the world. And then in terms of the improvements that I just mentioned, as of March 2021, there have been just under 2,000 fishery improvements made. Those statistics are out of date now, so it will be even higher. And this just demonstrates how the program is contributing to our global goals. Our target as of 2030 that we recently determined is that we want a third of all wild marine catch to be engaged with the MSC. It's an ambitious target, but we think it's possible and indeed essential for safeguarding our future oceans. Just to quickly break down what improvement actually means and what it often looks like, it means reducing bycatch of endangered species. As you can see here, this has happened a lot in the last 3 years. It means more careful ecosystem protection. It means better harvest strategies that don't take quite so much of the stock. It means better managed fisheries. So those are the basics of our fisheries standard. But I think as well, it's important to understand our chain of custody standard. And this essentially, like I said earlier, functions as our supply chain assurance scheme. And it essentially ensures that the hard work that the fisheries have gone to catch sustainably goes recognized and rewarded. So between the ocean and your plate, fish and seafood products will pass through many different stages. Supply chains can be very complicated, we all know that. And what the MSC chain of custody standard does is ensures that products from MSC certified sustainable fisheries are traceable, clearly identifiable, and clearly segregated from non-certified products at every stage of the supply chain. So in this way, it provides a sort of third-party assurance for businesses. Our standard, just like the fishery standard, is independently certified by auditors. We do not do the certification, we merely set the standard. And as I mentioned, it is a rigorous standard. We are the most recognized and most rigorous global certification for wild marine catch. So one of the things that chain of custody will guarantee, for example, is that mislabeling is low. So unfortunately, it's not uncommon in fish supply chains for fish to be mislabeled and to have a label put on that implies it's from a different origin, perhaps a more sustainable origin. But DNA testing for MSC fish has shown that under 1% of MSC fish is mislabeled, which is lower than the average for fish. So clearly it does have some impact on supply chain assurance. Just a quick note on the Aquaculture Stewardship Council, or ASC. You've probably seen their eco-label around on products as well. So they are the world's leading certification for farmed seafood. They are a separate organization to MSC, but they're our sister organization. We work quite closely. Like us, products are independently certified to be sustainable and socially responsible, and we do cooperate with them a lot. So they share our chain of custody standard, which can be very useful for businesses looking to source from both of us. We also cooperate on the seaweed standard, for example. But like I said, it is a separate organization, so I won't go into too much detail on it. Okay, I now just want to quickly talk about the MSC's role in the UK market, how things have been changing in the last few years, and what our plans for the next few years are. So as of the 2021-22 financial year, we reported that consumers had spent 1.25 billion on MSC certified fish. This represents a third of all seafood sales being on MSC products, which is obviously very reassuring. There was unfortunately some stagnation in 21-22. This was largely due to the suspension of the Northeast Atlantic mackerel fishery, which happened a couple of years ago. This was a big blow for us. It accounted for 10% of MSC UK volume at peak. But so far this year, there have been promising figures, and it's reassuring in a way that purchases remain this high despite COVID's impact on food service. So we're hoping for some growth in the financial year that's just closing out. And just quickly, this is just a list of many of our partners that we currently work quite closely with. You'll recognize many of these names: Birdseye, big frozen food brand, almost all of the major UK retailers, major food service outlets such as McDonald's and JD Wetherspoon, tuna brands such as Prince's. We have a large movement in the UK market, and we hope that it will only continue to grow. And I also just quickly wanted to touch on species coverage. So you can see the big five in here: salmon, tuna, cod, haddock, pollock. And then underneath you have the data that we have on MSC labeling. So the consumption benchmarks, by the way, are from Seafish, so they're UK government statistics. And then the data on MSC labeling is our own. So salmon, obviously the most consumed species in the UK. We don't have a huge amount of coverage in that. That's because most of the salmon in the UK market is farmed, so it's not really possible for us to. But MSC and ASC together do have quite a high coverage, as I understand it. Tuna is currently much lower than it should be, but one of our main goals for this upcoming financial year is to massively grow that. Essentially, we think there's massive potential for MSC labeled tuna, and we're hoping to see much more of it entering the UK market soon. Then when we get into the most consumed whitefish, we have majority coverage in all three of these, which is obviously very good. Pollock, we're trying to promote as it's a very cheap fish, and many of our partners working in food service, for example, will use pollock to produce cheap MSC certified fish and chips. So that's an easy win for many companies that are worried about costs. And then cold water prawns as well, majority coverage. Mackerel, as I touched upon earlier, unfortunately has declined due to the suspension. I should also emphasize that although we do have this coverage within the big five, we don't want to just be focusing on these species. There's actually a growing species diversity of MSC certified products. So we've recently had some Cornish sardines join our program, lots of mussels, which, as Jack mentioned, very sustainable, but this is our coverage of the most consumed ones. Okay, and now I just want to briefly touch upon what consumers think of MSC, how widely known are we, what's the perception of us. This is independently commissioned consumer research that we commissioned from a company called GlobeScan, who do lots of consumer research with us. So the first takeaway from the data on this slide is that more and more people are buying eco-label products, and there's been a pretty significant jump since 2020. So you see in 2020, 35% of the general public said that they bought eco-labeled fish and seafood occasionally or as often as they can. As of 2022, that had jumped up to 41%, which is obviously very promising. And then the second takeaway from this chart on the right is that there is more pressure on businesses to support their sustainability claims with evidence. So 70% in 2020 of the general public agreed that supermarket and brand claims about sustainability and the environment need to be clearly labeled by an independent organization. And then in 2022, that went even higher, up to 77%. So clearly a strong consumer, care about the oceans, and they increasingly back independent sustainability certifiers. So it's going to be very important and increasingly important for businesses to be sustainable in 2023. And then some more data from GlobeScan. So awareness growth is strong. There's been a steady increase in recognition of specifically the MSC label over the last 6 years. So you can see here in 2016, 40% of the general public said that they had occasionally or often seen the MSC label. As of 2022, that had risen to 48%, which is very promising from us. And then amongst people who specifically consider themselves seafood consumers, people who are into seafood, a very narrow majority said that they had occasionally or often seen the MSC label. So there's strong recognition of our label, and it's growing, and we hope it will continue to grow. And this, in a way, connects to a pretty fundamental aim of ours, which is that we want sustainability to be accessible to all consumers. We don't want it to be perceived as elitist. We want the general public to keep enjoying the seafood that they love, maybe even branching out into some new things, and know that they're supporting positive change in the process. We are fundamentally not an anti-fishing organization. We want fishing to continue in a sustainable manner, and we want sustainability to be relevant to people's real lives in that sense. And just to start rounding up, I want to talk briefly about some of the publicity campaigns that we do. So every year since 2020, we've run a Sustainable Seafood Week marketing campaign, and you can just see some of the history of it on here. So we started off with the theme, "This is what it takes." This was designed essentially to convey to consumers that just small changes in their consumption habits can have a really big impact on sustainability. We've changed it more recently to "All hands on deck," which has, I think, a bit more of an urgency to it, saying that we need to try and improve our sustainability of our consumption as soon as possible. And what we essentially want to do with our Sustainable Seafood Week campaigns is celebrate the work that fisheries and our partners do, and at the same time spread awareness of sustainability and MSC amongst the general public. And this coming year, we're actually going to extend it from a week to a month, so Sustainable Seafood September. We think this offers more flexibility for our partners to get involved when they can, so it'll be a great year to get involved for the first time. Just some interesting things that we did in the past year in 2022 Sustainable Seafood Week. So educational content we put an emphasis on this year. We want the next generation to be interested in sustainability, to know what the Blue Eco label means. We also spread some recipes because, as Jack correctly touched upon, people feel quite intimidated by seafood. They don't often know how to prepare it. They often know how to make it nice. We've hired plenty of chefs to try and improve understanding of things such as scallops or crab, as you can see in these recipes, and how best to prepare them. And finally, we've been deepening our engagement with influencers to try and increase our publicity on a different form of social media, but an increasingly widely consumed format. But that is pretty much all I wanted to say. I guess I just wanted to get across that the MSc program is independent, it's rigorous, it's widely recognized. We're looking to build our presence in the UK market, and this will be useful to many businesses as sustainability just becomes more and more important in the consumer imagination. Please do get in touch with me if you're at all interested in MSc certification for your business, but I think that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.